Chapter 1. The Angel's Fall. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are legends that transcend even the brutality of eternal war. Among these tales, none shine with such tragic brilliance as that of Sanguinius, the great angel, most beloved of the Emperor's sons. His story begins not in glory, but in mystery, cast upon the winds of chaos, like all his brothers during the Primarch's gathering. The infant Primarch tumbled through the warp, that hellish dimension beyond reality, and fate decreed he would land upon Baal Secundus, one of the most inhospitable worlds in the Imperium. This was no gentle cradle for a demigod. Baal Secundus was a world of radiation-scorched wastes, where humanity clung to survival in tribes of mutants and outcasts. The red sands stretched endlessly beneath the dying sun, and the air itself carried the poison of ancient atomic wars. But Sanguinius was no ordinary child. Even as he fell from the sky, his destiny was written in his very being. The people of Baal found him in the wreckage of his fallen pod, and they beheld something that filled their radiation-scarred hearts with wonder. A child of perfect beauty, bearing upon his back two magnificent white wings. In a world of mutation and horror, here was mutation made divine. The tribes called him the Angel, for what else could he be? They raised him among them, though he grew with supernatural speed, his mind expanding to encompass knowledge that would take normal men lifetimes to acquire. Even as a youth, Sanguinius displayed the noble bearing and martial prowess that would define him throughout eternity. But more than his physical gifts, it was his compassion that set him apart. Where other Primarchs might have conquered through fear or domination, Sanguinius led through inspiration and love. The young angel united the tribes of Baal Secundus, not through subjugation, but through hope. He taught them that they were not cursed, but that even in mutation there could be purpose. Under his guidance, the tribes began to build rather than merely survive. They learned to see beyond their daily struggle for existence and to dream of something greater. Sanguinius gave them the greatest gift any leader can bestow upon his people. He gave them a future worth fighting for. Chapter 2. The Blood and the Flaw. As Sanguinius matured into his full power, he faced the greatest threat that Baal had known in millennia. From the deep desert wastes came the mutants, not the noble, struggling humans who had taken him in, but creatures twisted beyond recognition by chaos and radiation. These were the true children of Baal's apocalypse, beings who had given themselves entirely to their mutations, becoming monsters in body and soul. The war that followed would forge Sanguinius into the warrior he was destined to become. Leading his people, the angel took to the skies, his great wings bearing him into battle like an avatar of divine retribution. His prowess was beyond measure. Where he flew, the enemy fell like wheat before the scythe. But it was not his martial skill alone that won the day. It was his ability to inspire his warriors to heights of courage they never knew they possessed. Yet even in victory, there was a shadow. For Sanguinius carried within him a secret, a flaw that he would bear in silence for decades to come. The same genetic engineering that had given him his angelic wings, that had made him beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, had also planted within him a seed of darkness. He experienced visions, terrible, prophetic visions of a future painted in blood. In these nightmares, he saw his own death, saw himself broken and fallen, saw betrayal and horror beyond imagining. The red thirst, as it would come to be known, was no mere quirk of his gene seed. It It was a curse that would haunt not only Sanguinius, but all his sons throughout the ages. Even then, the angel felt its pull, the hunger, the rage that lurked beneath his noble exterior. But he was strong, and he channeled these dark impulses into righteous fury against the enemies of humanity. He transformed his curse into a weapon, his rage into purpose. When the emperor finally came to Baal, he found not a savage warlord, but a philosopher king, a leader who had turned a world of mutants and outcasts into a civilization worth saving. The reunion between father and son was one of mutual recognition and respect. The emperor saw in Sanguinius perhaps the closest reflection of his own ideals: nobility, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to humanity's future. And Sanguinius saw in the emperor the ultimate fulfillment of everything he had dreamed of for his people: a place among the stars, a purpose in the grand crusade to reunite mankind. Chapter 3: The Blood Angels Legion. With his reunion with the emperor, Sanguinius took command of his legion, the 9th Legion, which would forever after be known as the Blood Angels. These warriors were crafted from his own genetic template, carrying within them both his nobility and his curse. The transformation of the legion under Sanguinius' leadership was remarkable. Where once they had been simply brutal warriors, now they became exemplars of martial perfection, tempered with culture and refinement. Sanguinius instilled in his sons a love of art and beauty that was unique among the legions. The Blood Angels became not just warriors, but artists, sculptors, and poets. Their armor was adorned with intricate designs, their weapons were works of art, and their battle barges housed galleries and libraries. The angel taught them that to fight for humanity meant to fight for everything that made humanity worth preserving. Not just survival, but culture, beauty, and the pursuit of excellence in all things. But this refinement never softened their edge in battle. If anything, it made them more formidable. The Blood Angels fought with a passion that terrified their enemies, a combination of perfect technique and overwhelming fury. When they descended from the skies, their jump packs screaming, their golden armor gleaming in the light of alien suns, they were the embodiment of the Emperor's wrath. And always, at their head, flew Sanguinius himself, the great angel, his wings spread wide, his sword blazing with righteous fire. The Legion's battle honors grew beyond counting. They fought on 10,000 worlds, bringing compliance to human worlds lost in the darkness and exterminating Xenos threats that had plagued humanity for millennia. Sanguinius led from the front, never asking his sons to face any danger he would not face himself. His courage became legendary even among the Primarchs, his tactical brilliance earning respect even from brothers like Gilliman and the Lion. Yet always, the flaw lurked beneath the surface. In the heat of battle, some Blood Angels would succumb to the red thirst, losing themselves in a berserk fury that knew no friend from foe. Sanguinius grieved for every son lost to the curse, seeing in their fall a reflection of his own inner struggle. He worked tirelessly to find a cure, to lift the burden he had inadvertently placed upon them. But the flaw was woven into their very genes, as much a part of them as their loyalty or their courage. The great angel also fostered a special relationship between his legion and the mortal humans they fought to protect. Unlike some Primarchs, who saw humanity as something to be ruled, Sanguinius genuinely loved the people of the Imperium. He would walk among them without fear, speak with them as equals, and his sons learned this empathy from him. The Blood Angels became known not just as fearsome warriors, but as protectors who truly cared about those they defended. Chapter 4: Brotherhood among Demigods. Among the Primarchs, Sanguinius occupied a unique position. He was beloved by nearly all his brothers, a mediator and peacemaker in a family of warrior kings. His relationship with Horus Lupercal, the War Master, was particularly strong. They fought side by side in countless campaigns, and Sanguinius saw in Horus the same drive for excellence, the same charisma that drew warriors to their banner. They were brothers, not just in blood, but in spirit, sharing a vision of the Imperium's future that seemed destined to be fulfilled. With Robot Guilliman, Sanguinius shared the love of organization and culture, while Guilliman's genius lay in logistics and administration. Sanguinius provided the artistic and philosophical counterbalance. They would spend hours in discussion, debating the nature of the Imperium they were building, the legacy they would leave for humanity. Guilliman respected Sanguinius's tactical acumen, while Sanguinius admired Guilliman's ability to turn theory into practical reality. The Angel also formed a close bond with Jagatai Khan, the Primarch of the White Scars. Both valued freedom and the joy of personal combat, though they expressed these values differently. Where the Khan was wild and untamed, racing across the steppes of his adopted world, Sanguinius was refined and measured, yet both understood the other's need for speed and flight. They shared the warrior's wisdom that transcended words. Even with the more troubled of his brothers, Sanguinius maintained relationships built on respect and understanding. He saw the brilliance in Fulgrim before the Emperor's children fell to excess, recognized the nobility in Mortarion despite the Death Guard Primarch's bitterness, and appreciated the craftsmanship of Perturabo, even when others dismissed the Lord of Iron. Sanguinius had a gift for seeing the best in his brothers, for drawing out their better natures. Only with a few did he struggle. Angron's mindless rage troubled him deeply, seeing in the World Eater's Primarch a dark reflection of what he himself might become if he lost control. Conrad Kurze, the Night Haunter, disturbed him even more, where Sanguinius had visions of possible futures and strove to prevent the darkest outcomes. Kurze seemed to embrace his prophetic nightmares, using them as justification for atrocity. Yet even Kurze, in his more lucid moments, respected Sanguinius, perhaps seeing in the Angel what he himself might have been. The Emperor himself held Sanguinius in special regard. It was whispered among the legions that the Angel was the Emperor's favorite son, though the Master of Mankind would never show such favoritism openly. But in private moments, the Emperor would seek Sanguinius's counsel on matters of philosophy and purpose. The Angel understood, perhaps better than any of his brothers, the terrible burden the Emperor carried, the sacrifice that leadership demanded. Chapter 5: The Cygnus Cluster and Betrayal's First Taste. The Great Crusade raged across the galaxy, and the Blood Angels carved a legend in blood and glory across 1,000 stars. But fate was turning dark, though few yet perceived it. The seeds of the Horus heresy were being sown in secret, and even the noble Sanguinius would be tested in ways that would shake his soul to its foundations. The call came from the Cygnus Cluster, a region of space where a massive orc threat had been reported. The Blood Angels were tasked with cleansing these worlds, bringing them into compliance before the Greenskin menace could spread further. Sanguinius led his legion to war with the same dedication he brought to every campaign, never suspecting that he was flying into a trap orchestrated by his own brother. For Horus, newly turned to chaos, had set this trap with careful precision. The Cygnus cluster was no orc stronghold, but a demon world, ruled by the greater demon Kabanda, a bloodthirster of Khorne. As the Blood Angels made their initial assault, reality itself seemed to turn against them. The skies of Cygnus Prime ran red with blood, and from the warp itself poured forth legions of demons. The battle that followed was a nightmare made manifest. The Blood Angels fought against enemies that defied nature, creatures of pure malevolence that seemed unkillable. Worse, the psychic assault of chaos began to awaken the red thirst in the Legion on a massive scale. Marines who had controlled their inner beast for decades suddenly succumbed, tearing into friend and foe alike in their bloodlust. The carefully maintained discipline of the Legion began to fracture under the demonic onslaught. Sanguinius himself faced Kabanda in single combat, a confrontation between angel and demon that would echo through the ages. The Bloodthirster was a mountain of muscle and hate, wielding an axe that had ended worlds. The two clashed in the blood-red skies of Cygnus, and the shockwaves of their battle could be felt across the entire system. Kabanda mocked the angel, revealing to him glimpses of Horus's betrayal, planting seeds of doubt about the Imperium's future. In a moment of a terrible fury, Kabanda seized Sanguinius and broke him across his knee, snapping the angel's legs like twigs. The sight of their Primarch falling from the sky, broken and bleeding, nearly destroyed the Blood Angel's morale entirely. Only the desperate courage of his sons, fighting to recover their fallen father, prevented complete annihilation. But Sanguinius was a Primarch, and his will was indomitable. Even broken, he dragged himself back to consciousness, marshalling his legion for a final desperate assault. When he faced Kabanda again, it was with the full fury of his rage unleashed. This time, he cast the demon down, banishing it back to the warp with such force that it would be centuries before the Bloodthirster could manifest again. The victory, however, was Pyrrhic. The Legion had been savaged. Thousands of his sons were dead or lost to the red thirst, and Sanguinius himself was forever changed by what he had learned. Chapter 6. The Heresy Unfolds. As Sanguinius and his battered legion limped away from Cygnus, word reached them that validated his darkest fears. Horus had turned traitor. The War Master, most beloved of all the Primarchs, had raised his banner against the Emperor. Istvan III had been virus-bombed, loyalist Marines slaughtered by their own brothers. The Imperium was tearing itself apart. The news struck Sanguinius like a physical blow. Horus had been more than a brother. He had been a friend, a companion in arms, someone the angel had trusted implicitly. The revelation of his betrayal forced Sanguinius to confront a terrible truth. If Horus could fall, then anyone could fall, even himself. The visions that had haunted him his entire life took on new, sinister meaning. He saw now that they were not merely possibilities, but prophecies of an inevitable tragedy. Despite his injuries and his legion's weakened state, Sanguinius made the decision to return to Terra with all speed. He knew that the Emperor would need every loyal son, every warrior who could be mustered for the defense of humanity's throne world. But fate and the warp had other plans. The Ruin Storm, a galaxy-spanning warp tempest created by the traitors, cut off Terra from much of the Imperium. The Blood Angels found themselves trapped, unable to reach their father in his hour of greatest need. This period of isolation became known as the Imperium Secundus, when Guilliman established a backup Imperium in Ultramar, believing Terra had fallen. Sanguinius, the Lion, and Guilliman, three of the Emperor's most loyal sons, found themselves working together to preserve what they could of the Imperium. Guilliman, in a move that shocked many, declared that Sanguinius should be the regent of this new Imperium, recognizing in the Angel the nobility and leadership that the dark times required. Sanguinius accepted this burden with his characteristic grace, though it weighed heavily upon him. He knew in his heart that Terra still stood, that the Emperor still lived, and that his place was at his father's side. Every moment spent in Ultramar felt like a betrayal, even though he was bound by circumstance beyond his control. He worked tirelessly with his brothers to find a way through the ruin storm, to breach the barrier that kept them from the war they needed to fight. During this time, Sanguinius's visions grew more frequent and more vivid. He saw clearly now the confrontation that awaited him, saw himself facing Horus in single combat, saw the great betrayer's power amplified by all four Chaos Gods, saw his own death painted in terrible detail. He knew that to return to Terra meant to embrace his doom, yet he never wavered. This was his purpose, his destiny, and he would meet it with eyes open and wings spread wide. The relationship between the three Primarchs during the Imperium Secundus was complex. Guilliman deferred to Sanguinius's judgment in matters of leadership, seeing in the angel qualities he knew he himself lacked. The Lion, ever pragmatic and suspicious, nevertheless trusted Sanguinius's wisdom, even when he questioned Guilliman's motives. The Angel became the bridge between them, the one who could reconcile Guilliman's idealism with the Lion's ruthlessness. Chapter 7. The Road to Terra. Finally, through combined effort and tremendous sacrifice, the three loyal Primarchs found a way to breach the ruin storm. The path was perilous, requiring them to navigate through the very heart of the warp's fury. But Sanguinius never hesitated. With the Blood Angels, the Dark Angels, and the Ultramarines united, they carved the corridor through the madness, their combined will and faith creating a lighthouse in the storm. The journey to Terra was a gauntlet of horrors. Demon fleets assailed them at every turn, reality itself seeming to rebel against their progress. Ships were lost, thousands of warriors died, holding the corridor open for their brothers. Through it all, Sanguinius remained a beacon of hope and determination. When Marines faltered, seeing their brothers dragged into the warp or corrupted by its touch, it was the Angel's presence that steadied them, his voice that reminded them why they fought. As they approached the Sol system, the full scale of the catastrophe became apparent. Horus had brought half the legions to Terra's doorstep, a host so vast that it blotted out the stars. The War Master's fleet was a thing of nightmares, corrupted and twisted by chaos, crewed by traitors who had once been humanity's finest warriors. The siege had already begun, and Terra burned under the onslaught of the traitor legions. Sanguinius led the relief force into the Sol system in a desperate race against time. They smashed through the blockade that Horus had established, the Blood Angels in the vanguard, their Primarch's fury giving them strength beyond measure. The sight of loyalist reinforcements breaking through the traitor lines gave hope to the defenders on Terra, even as it drew Horus's wrathful attention. The great angel knew that he was flying toward his death. His visions had become constant now, showing him every detail of the fate that awaited him. He saw himself standing before Horus in the War Master's battle barge, saw the moment when his oldest friend would strike him down. Yet knowing this changed nothing. A lesser being might have fled, might have sought some way to avoid the prophesied doom. But Sanguinius was no lesser being. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, understanding that true nobility meant sacrifice. Upon reaching Terra, Sanguinius took command of the defense of the Eternity Wall spaceport, one of the most critical defensive positions. This massive structure controlled access to the Imperial Palace, and its loss would mean the end of all hope. The angel threw himself into the defense with every ounce of his tactical genius and his personal prowess. For weeks that felt like years, he held the wall against impossible odds. The traitor forces that assaulted the Eternity Wall were beyond counting. World Eaters, lost to the Butcher's nails and their endless rage. Death Guard, bloated with Nurgle's plagues. Emperor's children, pursuing sensation even in slaughter. And always, the demon hordes that poured from the warp like a tide of nightmares. Sanguinius fought them all, his blade taking a toll beyond counting, his wings bearing him to wherever the fighting was fiercest. Chapter 8. The Siege and the Stand. The Siege of Terra was hell made manifest. The cradle of humanity had become its funeral pyre, and every street, every wall, every inch of ground was bought with blood. Sanguinius stood at the center of this maelstrom, a beacon of golden light in the darkness, his sons rallying to him time and again as the defenses began to crumble. The Blood Angels fought with the desperation born of knowledge. They knew that if Terra fell, everything was lost. Their Primarch's example pushed them beyond all mortal limits. When they should have been exhausted, they fought on. When ammunition ran dry, they wielded their weapons as clubs. When those broke, they used their fists. The red thirst, normally a curse to be contained, became a weapon of necessity. Sanguinius gave his sons permission to embrace the beast within, channeling it into focused fury against the traitors. But even the angel's presence could not stop the inevitable. The walls began to fall, section by section. Traitor titans strode through the ruins, their weapons carving canyons through the imperial architecture. Demon princes led charges that seemed unstoppable. And above it all, Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, hung in orbit like a malevolent star, directing the assault with the War Master's tactical genius. Sanguinius knew the defenders were losing. He could see it in the exhausted faces of his warriors, in the diminishing supplies, in the ground that they yielded day by day. The Emperor was locked in a psychic battle in the Imperial dungeon, holding the Webway Gate against an endless tide of demons. He could not aid the surface forces. Everything depended on whether they could hold long enough for the loyalist reinforcements from Guilliman and the Lion to arrive. During a brief respite in the fighting, Sanguinius addressed his sons. He did not lie to them about their chances, did not offer false hope. Instead, he reminded them of who they were. Blood Angels, sons of Baal, inheritors of a legacy that stretched back to before they had ever left their poisoned homeworld. He told them that they had already achieved immortality through their deeds, that their names would be remembered as long as humanity endured. He told them he was proud to call them his sons. And then the final assault began. Horus, sensing that the Emperor's forces were at their breaking point, committed everything to one overwhelming push. The sky turned black with drop pods and landing craft. The ground shook with the tread of Titan legions. The air itself seemed to scream as reality strained under the weight of so much concentrated malice. At the Eternity Wall, Sanguinius made his final stand. He knew that once this position fell, the path to the Imperial Palace would be open, and with it, the end of everything. So he fought as he had never fought before, his sword blazing with righteous fire, his wings carrying him through the enemy ranks like a golden tempest. He was everywhere at once, it seemed. Wherever his sons needed him most, there he appeared, turning back assaults that should have been unstoppable. The Blood Angels sang as they fought, ancient songs from Baal, hymns of defiance and pride. Their voices rose above the din of battle, and even the traitors paused in wonder at the sound. Here was humanity at its finest, not the brutality of the World Eaters, not the cruel perfection of the Emperor's children, but nobility and sacrifice, courage in the face of certain doom. Chapter 9. The Boarding of the Vengeful Spirit. Then came the moment that changed everything. Horus, in a gesture that was part arrogance and part genuine respect, lowered his shields. The Vengeful Spirit, that mighty battle barge, suddenly became vulnerable to teleport assault. It was a challenge, an invitation, and a trap all at once. The War Master was calling out his father, daring the Emperor to face him in single combat, rather than hiding behind his walls. The Emperor understood what this meant. He knew Horus was chaos-empowered beyond measure, that the War Master had become something more and less than human. He knew that this was likely a trap designed to separate him from his defenders. But he also knew that this was the only chance to end the siege before Terra was completely lost. The Emperor gathered his most loyal sons and his finest warriors for a teleport assault directly into the heart of the enemy's flagship. Sanguinius insisted on accompanying his father. He knew, oh, how he knew, what awaited him on that ship. His visions had shown him this moment countless times, but there was never any question in his mind. This was his purpose, his destiny, the reason he had been created. If the Emperor was walking into danger, then his most loyal son would walk beside him. The teleport was chaotic, scattered by the warp energies that saturated the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor's strike force was split apart, each element arriving in different sections of the ship. Sanguinius found himself separated from his father, accompanied only by a handful of his Blood Angels. They were deep in the corrupted vessel's bowels, surrounded by the enemy on all sides. What followed was a running battle through the nightmarish corridors of the once great flagship. The Vengeful Spirit had been transformed by its exposure to chaos, its clean lines corrupted into organic curves, its crew chambers mutated into things that defied sanity. Sanguinius and his sons cut their way through cultists and traitor marines, through demons and possessed servitors, always pushing forward toward the throne room where he knew Horus waited. With each step, more of his sons fell. They bought their Primarch's advance with their lives, holding corridors so he could pass, sacrificing themselves to bring down greater demons that sought to bar his way. Sanguinius mourned each loss even as he pressed forward, knowing that their sacrifice could not be wasted, that he had to reach Horus before the Emperor did. The angel's wings were torn and bloodied, his magnificent armor cracked and dented, his sword notched from endless combat. Yet still he flew, still he fought, his determination unwavering. He could feel Horus's presence ahead, could sense the terrible power that his brother had embraced. The visions of his own death played constantly before his eyes now, but they no longer frightened him. He had made his peace with fate. Finally, after what felt like hours of fighting, Sanguinius burst into the throne room of the vengeful spirit. There, seated upon a throne of skulls and brass, waited Horus Lupercal, Warmaster of Chaos, most favored of the dark gods. He had been transformed beyond recognition. He was massive, easily twice the height of a normal Primarch. His armor fused with his flesh, great horns curving from his head. His eyes glowed with the power of the warp, and his mere presence seemed to drain hope from the world. Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. "Brother," Horus said, and his voice was like thunder, layered with the whispers of demons. "I knew you would come. I have seen it, just as you have." Sanguinius stepped forward, his wings spreading wide, his sword held ready. "It is not too late, Horus. Even now, you can turn back from this path. The Emperor would forgive you. I would forgive you." The Warmaster laughed, and the sound was filled with genuine mirth mixed with infinite sadness. "Forgiveness? Oh, my angelic brother, you understand nothing. I have ascended beyond the need for forgiveness. I have embraced the truth that our Father denied us, that gods exist, and they offer us power beyond imagination. Join me, Sanguinius. Together, we could reshape reality itself." "I have seen gods," Sanguinius replied softly. "I have fought their demons, seen what they offer, and I have found it wanting. There is no truth in chaos, brother, only madness wearing the mask of power." Horus rose from his throne, and the room itself seemed to shake. "Then you choose death? How noble, how predictable. You always were Father's favorite, weren't you? The perfect son, the one without flaw." The Warmaster's eyes narrowed. "But I know your secret, brother. I know about the red thirst, about the rage that lurks within you. You're not so different from me. We both carry darkness inside us. I simply chose to embrace mine. The difference," Sanguinius said, launching himself forward, "is that I never let the darkness define me. The battle that erupted shook the vengeful spirit to its foundations. Sanguinius fought with every ounce of skill and power he possessed, his blade singing as it carved through the air, his wings carrying him in patterns too fast for mortal eyes to follow. He struck at Horus with the fury of righteous vengeance, each blow carrying the weight of betrayal, the pain of a galaxy burning, the grief of a brotherhood shattered. But Horus was no longer merely a Primarch. He was Chaos Ascendant, blessed by all four of the dark gods, wielding power that could unmake reality itself. He met Sanguinius' assault with contemptuous ease, his own world-breaker mace crushing down with the force of falling mountains. The Warmaster was toying with him, and both brothers knew it. "Is this your best, Angel?" Horus mocked, catching Sanguinius' sword on his mace and hurling him across the room. "You're fighting for a lie, for an emperor who sees you as nothing more than a tool. I fight for truth, for freedom, for ascension. The gods have shown me wonders you cannot imagine." Sanguinius rose, blood leaking from his mouth, his wings battered. "I have imagined your wonders, brother. I have seen them in my nightmares, and I reject them utterly." He charged again, knowing it was futile, knowing the outcome, but unable to do anything else. This was his nature, to fight, to resist, to stand defiant in the face of overwhelming darkness. The angel fought beautifully, even in defeat. His every move was perfect, his technique flawless. If Horus had been merely a Primarch, Sanguinius might have stood a chance. But against a being empowered by the united force of chaos, there could be only one outcome. Slowly, inevitably, Horus battered down his brother's defense. The War Master's blows became heavier, more brutal, and Sanguinius began to falter. "Submit," Horus commanded, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority. "Kneel before me, and I will make your death quick. Fight on, and I will make you suffer as you have never suffered before." Sanguinius, on his knees, broken and bleeding, looked up at the brother he had once loved. "I will never kneel to you, traitor. Not to you, and not to your false gods. I will stand." And impossibly, he did stand, using his sword to lever himself upright, his wings spreading one final time. "Then die standing," Horus said, and there was genuine sorrow in his voice. The War Master raised his mace high and brought it down with all his chaos-enhanced strength. The blow struck Sanguinius full in the chest, crushing through his armor, breaking his body, extinguishing the light that had burned so brightly for nearly 2 centuries. The great angel fell, his wings spread beneath him like a shroud, his blood pooling on the deck of the vengeful spirit. In death, his face was peaceful, almost serene. He had seen this moment coming his entire life, had walked toward it with open eyes, and now it was done. Sanguinius, the brightest of the Emperor's sons, was dead. But his sacrifice was not in vain. As Horus stood over his brother's body, feeling the first stirrings of regret, the doors to the throne room exploded inward. The Emperor of mankind had arrived, and he had seen what the War Master had done to his most beloved son. The grief and rage in the Emperor's eyes would have unmade worlds, and in that moment, Horus felt fear for the first time since his corruption. Chapter 11. The Legacy of the Angel. The death of Sanguinius marked a turning point in the Horus heresy. The Emperor, driven by grief and fury at the loss of his favorite son, fought Horus with a power that had been restrained until that moment. The final battle between father and son would end with Horus's death and the Emperor's entombment upon the golden throne. But it was Sanguinius' sacrifice that made that victory possible. His death, his refusal to bend, his final act of defiance. These reminded the Emperor of what was at stake, of what humanity could be at its finest. In the 10,000 years since that terrible day, Sanguinius has become more than a Primarch, more than a legend. He has become a saint, an ideal, a symbol of everything the Imperium holds sacred. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters venerate him with a devotion that borders on worship, seeing in their lost Primarch the ultimate example of nobility and sacrifice. The Red Thirst and its darker evolution, the Black Rage, continue to plague the sons of Sanguinius. But where once these might have been seen as curses, they are now understood as sacred afflictions, connections to their Primarch's final moments. When a Blood Angel succumbs to the Black Rage, he experiences Sanguinius' last battle as if it were his own, fighting and dying as the angel did, standing defiant against the darkness. On Baal, the chapter's fortress monastery is a shrine to their Primarch's memory. Every battle brother spends time in meditation before the great statue of Sanguinius that dominates the Hall of Heroes, contemplating the sacrifice their gene-father made and preparing themselves for the day when they too might be called upon to give everything for humanity. The Sanguinor a mysterious golden-winged figure that appears to the blood angels in their darkest hours, is believed by many to be the lingering essence of Sanguinius himself, or perhaps the collective hope and nobility of all his sons given form. When the Sanguinor appears on the battlefield, blood angels fight with renewed vigor, seeing in that golden figure a reflection of their Primarch's eternal watch over them. Throughout the Imperium, Sanguinius is remembered in art, in statuary, in prayers whispered by Imperial citizens who have never seen a Space Marine, but who know the story of the angel who gave his life for humanity. He represents the highest ideals of the Imperium: selfless sacrifice, unwavering courage, beauty amidst horror, and hope in the face of despair. The tale of Sanguinius is ultimately a tragedy, but it is a tragedy that gives meaning to the endless suffering of the 41st millennium. His life proves that even in a universe of unrelenting darkness, nobility is possible. His death demonstrates that some things are worth dying for, and his legacy shows that one being, through courage and sacrifice, can change the fate of an entire species. 10,000 years after his death, the angel's shadow still falls across the Imperium. In every Blood Angel's successor chapter, in every desperate last stand, in every moment when hope seems lost, and yet someone chooses to fight on, there, Sanguinius lives. Not in flesh, but in spirit, in example, in the eternal reminder that humanity, at its best, can produce heroes worthy of legend. The great angel may have fallen, his wings forever stilled, his voice forever silenced, but his light has never been extinguished. It burns in the hearts of his sons, in the faith of the Imperium citizens, and in the eternal struggle against the darkness. For as long as humanity endures, as long as there are those willing to stand against the night, Sanguinius will never truly die. His story is one of predetermined fate embraced rather than fled from, of nobility maintained in the face of internal and external darkness, of brotherhood cherished and mourned when it is betrayed, and of ultimate sacrifice made with full knowledge and acceptance. In a galaxy where gods are real and malevolent, where hope is the first casualty and despair the only constant, Sanguinius proved that one being with courage enough to face their doom with grace can inspire billions for millennia to come. The Blood Angels, those who carry his gene seed and his legacy, know that they are both blessed and cursed. They will never escape the shadow of his death, will never be free from the red thirst and the black rage. But they would have it no other way, for these afflictions connect them to their Primarch in a way that no other legion can claim. They do not just remember Sanguinius, they experience his final moments. They feel his pain, they share his defiance, and in doing so, they become worthy of the legacy he left them. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But once, there was an angel, and his light has never been forgotten. This is the legacy of Sanguinius, the great angel of Baal, the most beloved of the Emperor's sons, the martyr whose sacrifice helped save humanity from extinction. His story is the Imperium story, tragic, beautiful, and eternal. Epilogue: the angel's echo through eternity. As the centuries turned into millennia after Sanguinius' death, his influence only grew stronger throughout the Imperium. The Blood Angels chapter became one of the most revered of all the Space Marine chapters, their reputation for nobility and martial prowess unmatched. But more than this, the angel's legacy spread to the successor chapters created from his gene seed, the Flesh Terrors, the Blood Drinkers, the Angels in Carmine, and dozens of others. each carried within them a fragment of Sanguinius's essence. Each struggled with the same curses, and each strove to live up to the impossible standard their Primarch had set. The Sanguinary priesthood, unique to the sons of Sanguinius, arose to manage the Red Thirst and to honor their fallen Primarch. These warrior priests wore death masks fashioned in the angel's image, carrying the blood chalice that held drops of Sanguinius's own blood, preserved through the ages. When a battle brother felt the thirst rising, the Sanguinary priests would minister to him, helping him channel his rage into righteous purpose rather than mindless slaughter. The Death Company, those poor souls who had succumbed to the Black Rage, were honored even in their madness. Painted black, adorned with red crosses, they were unleashed in battle as living weapons, experiencing their Primarch's final hours over and over. They knew no fear, felt no pain, acknowledged no defeat. They were Sanguinius, fighting Horus for all eternity. When they finally fell in combat, it was considered a blessing, a release from their torment, and a reunification with their Primarch in death. Throughout Imperial history, the Blood Angels and their successors have stood as bulwarks against the darkness. During the War of the Beast, when the largest orc invasion in Imperial history threatened to overwhelm Terras itself, it was the Blood Angels who led the counterattack, channeling their Primarch's fury against the Greenskin menace. In the Gothic War, when Chaos fleets ravaged an entire sector, the sons of Sanguinius were in the vanguard of every battle, their golden armor shining like their father's wings once did. The chapter's homeworld of Baal and its moons became pilgrimage sites for Imperial citizens seeking hope in dark times. The radiation-scarred deserts, where Sanguinius had first unified the tribes, were preserved as sacred ground. Young aspirants from across the Imperium came to prove themselves worthy of joining the Blood Angels, undergoing the same trials that had forged their Primarch's first followers. Most died in the attempt, but those who survived emerged as living embodiments of the Angel's legacy. In the Cryptus campaign of the 41st Millennium, when Hive Fleet Leviathan descended upon Baal itself, the Blood Angels faced extinction. Trillions of Tyranids swarmed across their homeworld, and for a time, it seemed that the sons of Sanguinius would finally fall. Commander Dante, the oldest living space marine, led the desperate defense, channeling his Primarch's tactical genius and indomitable will. In the darkest moment, when all seemed lost, the Sanguinor appeared, that mysterious golden figure, and the Blood Angels rallied. They drove back the Tyranids, though at a terrible cost, proving that the Angel's legacy could not be extinguished by any Xenos threat. The artistic traditions that Sanguinius had instilled in his legion persisted through the millennia. Blood Angels and their successors were not just warriors, but craftsmen, creating works of beauty even as they dealt in death. Their battle barges housed galleries filled with paintings and sculptures. Their armor was adorned with intricate designs that took decades to complete, and their weapons were masterpieces that combined functionality with aesthetic perfection. This dedication to beauty was not vanity, but a reminder of what they fought for. Not just survival, but the preservation of all that made humanity worth saving. The Angel's teachings about the value of mortal human life also persisted, setting the Blood Angels apart from some of their more callous brother chapters. They would go to extraordinary lengths to protect Imperial citizens, seeing in every mortal a reflection of the people of Baal who had raised their Primarch. This compassion combined with their fearsome combat prowess, made them beloved by the populations they defended and feared by the enemies they faced. In the great ecclesiarchy cathedrals across the Imperium, Sanguinius was venerated alongside the Emperor himself. Statues depicted him as the perfect warrior angel, wings spread, sword raised, forever defending humanity against the darkness. Prayers were offered in his name, and children grew up hearing tales of the angel who had died so that they might live. To the common imperial citizen who would never see a space marine or understand the complexities of the Horus heresy, Sanguinius represented something simple and powerful. Proof that heroes were real, that sacrifice mattered, and that even against impossible odds, courage could prevail. The prophecies surrounding Sanguinius never fully ceased after his death. Seers and psychers across the Imperium sometimes glimpsed visions of the angel, often in conjunction with predictions of great crises or momentous victories. Some believed these were merely echoes of past events, psychic recordings of Sanguinius's final moments playing across the warp. Others held that the angel's soul still existed in some form, watching over humanity and intervening in moments of dire need. During the 13th Black Crusade, when Abaddon the Despoiler finally succeeded in creating the Great Rift and splitting the Imperium in two, the Blood Angels were among the first to respond to the crisis. They fought on both sides of the divide, their successor chapters coordinating across impossible distances to stem the tide of chaos. In those dark days, when demons walked freely on imperial worlds and hope seemed a distant memory, the sons of Sanguinius stood as a golden bulwark, proving that their Primarch's defiance lived on in them. The return of Robut Guilliman, brought back to life in the Imperium's darkest hour, brought with it a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost. Guilliman, seeing the Blood Angels and remembering his brother, wept openly for the first time in 10,000 years. He spoke of Sanguinius's nobility, his wisdom, his kindness, qualities that the grim darkness of the 41st millennium desperately needed. The Lord Commander of the Imperium made it clear that if any single Primarch could have steered humanity away from its current state of decline, it would have been the angel. Yet, even in the darkness, the Blood Angels maintained their traditions and their hope. Chapter Master Dante, ancient beyond measure, continued to lead his warriors with the same dedication that Sanguinius had shown. The Blood Angels' librarians searched endlessly for a cure to the red thirst and the black rage, seeking to lift the curse that their Primarch had borne. And in every battle, in every desperate last stand, the sons of Sanguinius fought as their father had taught them, with courage, with honor, and with an unshakable belief in humanity's right to survive. The tale of Sanguinius thus became more than history. It became mythology, a foundational story that defined an entire aspect of the Imperium's identity. His life showed what humanity could aspire to. His struggle with his inner darkness demonstrated that nobility was a choice rather than an inherent trait. And his death proved that some prices were worth paying. In a galaxy where the gods were cruel, where hope was often a lie, and where every day brought fresh horrors, the memory of the angel who had stood defiant unto death gave billions of humans a reason to keep fighting. The Blood Angels themselves understood that they could never truly live up to their Primarch's example. Sanguinius had been unique, a combination of qualities that could never be replicated. But this did not discourage them. Instead, it gave them purpose. Every blood angel knew that he carried within him a fragment of his Primarch's legacy, and that by striving to embody the angel's virtues, he honored the sacrifice that had been made on the vengeful spirit so many millennia ago. In the end, Sanguinius's greatest legacy was not his martial prowess, though that had been unmatched. It was not his tactical genius, though that had won countless battles. It was not even his nobility, though that had inspired entire generations. His greatest legacy was the proof that in a universe designed to break the human spirit, one being could choose to remain unbroken. That in the face of predetermined fate, one could walk forward with grace and courage. That beauty, compassion, and hope were not weaknesses, but strengths that could endure for 10,000 years and beyond. The great angel of Baal had fallen, but his wings had cast a shadow across the galaxy that no darkness could fully eclipse. And in that shadow, humanity found the strength to endure, to fight, and to believe that somewhere beyond the endless war, there might still be a future worth the terrible price they paid to reach it. This is the saga of Sanguinius, Primarch, angel, martyr, and eternal symbol of humanity's noblest aspirations. His story began on a poisoned world and ended in a traitor's throne room. But his legacy will continue as long as a single human being looks up at the stars and dares to hope for something better. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But once there was an angel, and his light endures eternal.